Hello team, welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pierce. This is a Iran conflict update. I feel like I'm a bit of a rolling news and analysis channel, and that's why I keep doing these lives. I say keep 2 days in a row, whoop-de-doo. I have a lot of stuff to share with you, a lot of analysis to do. Things are happening really quickly, and there's an awful lot of threads to tie together here. What I essentially see myself as is an excuse not to turn on mainstream media. Not that I denigrate mainstream media. They're doing a great job in reporting on stuff like this in ways that channels like mine couldn't possibly do, right? You need reporters on the ground and film crews and all this kind of stuff. So, but instead of turning on BBC News or CNN, hey, you can tune into me to talk through everything that's going on and hopefully get to a level of detail or at least depth that you may not get on the news channels, as they are generally reporting things more quickly, even when they're doing that kind of analysis. So thank you for choosing to be here at ATP News 24. I do appreciate it. And I hope that I also make sense, because I am no expert, right? I am no Iranian geopolitical expert. I am a YouTuber that's been doing this for a number of years, but hopefully my analysis does have some kind of credibility and make at least, you know, a little bit of sense to you. But I'm sure you'll let me know if it doesn't. We are going to, well, I'm going to start by thanking all the mods and all of you watching this. We're going to start with Spain, actually. I did an analysis yesterday, which is all still absolutely on point as far as I'm concerned. And I was looking somewhat positively at what the US was doing in terms of the military side of things, and talking about the difference between morality and legality. And it's an illegal conflict. It's an illegal war, whatever you want to call it, because the American politicians, depending on which side of the aisle they're on, are calling it different things. Some people, like, for example, Annalena Paolo Luna, I saw interviewed on MS Now just recently, was saying it's not a war, these are targeted strikes. And the guy was like, well, okay, you can call it what you like, but you know, it's looking pretty war-y to me. So yeah, this anyway, I was talking about how, you know, you can build up a case that what they're doing here is kind of good, but that it's illegal. And actually, when you look at second and third order consequences, actually that good turns to bad, could be terrible. So when you're giving a permission structure for China to invade Taiwan, when you are essentially validating Russia's invasion of Ukraine, then actually this doesn't look good. So we must understand that these things are nuanced, and we can hold several things in our minds at once. And I think Rory Stewart and Alistair Campbell did a good job when on their Restless Politics podcast talking about this. And in fact, Stewart here replicates the earlier opinion when he looks at what the Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez has said. So Rory Stewart says, probably the clearest and strongest way of expressing that you can be both against a hateful, destructive Iranian regime and think that Trump's actions are illegal, reckless, and destabilizing for the global order far beyond Iran. That's really important. We must not present a false dichotomy, and lots of people are doing this, which is, well, if you're not for Trump, you are therefore for Islamic fundamentalism as a regime. Do you know what I mean? Like, if you're not supporting Trump, therefore you must be supporting Ayatollah Khamenei or whoever's going to replace him. And that is a false dichotomy. We don't have to be one or the other. And in fact, there's definite, I think, necessity to have a far more nuanced approach. Now, Pedro Sanchez is one of the European leaders who has come out against what Trump is doing. And I say Trump because it's not ultimately clear that America as a population, or even as the Pentagon, or even as a Congress, is behind what Trump is doing. But Trump is doing this almost unilaterally. So the Spanish Prime Minister said, today more than ever, it is essential to remember that one can be against a hateful regime, as is the case with the Iranian regime, as is the whole of Spanish society, and at the same time be against an unjustified, dangerous military intervention outside of international law. This is essentially my position, right? That one must be against a war initiated without the authorization of the United States Congress or the United Nations Security Council, and, as I've said before, one that violates international law. So it's domestically against American rules and it's against international law. And there is always room for a negotiated solution instead of being dragged along by the devastation of arms as the only possible way out. Therefore, I would like, once again, as we have done since the beginning, to appeal for immediate de-escalation, for full respect of the international law in all of the conflicts we are unfortunately suffering, and for the urgency of resuming dialogue as soon as possible. That is where Spain will be, and that is where I believe the whole of the European Union should be. And I broadly agree with this, which is, I can look at the strikes going on in Iran and say that's really impressive from a military point of view. And it might immediately bring some good, as in it might facilitate a regime change, although there's a lot of debate about whether that's likely or not. But it's certainly degrading Iran's military capabilities. And I think that is a good thing. Ceteris paribus, all other things remaining equal, but all other things aren't remaining equal, right? And so we need to weigh that against all the risks that are involved, and that's all that I said yesterday. So I shouldn't need to keep laboring on that. Now, Pedro Sanchez has gone even further than this. Oops, I've just completely got rid of my source here. So Pedro Sanchez has gone not just against this from an abstract political point of view, but also very much from we aren't going to be involved in this whatsoever. Sort of like Keir Starmer was previously, but he's changed his tune, and we'll talk about that in a second. So Spain has expelled a US tanker aircraft from Moron after Madrid rejects providing support for the attack on Iran. So Spain has said you can't use our bases at all. And indeed, US aircraft leave Spain after government says bases cannot be used for Iran attacks. We're also hearing more from Spain, with the country's foreign minister, Jose Manuel Alvarez, saying the country would not allow its military bases to be used for attacks on Iran, which Spain has condemned. Now, we heard that this is why Chagos was so controversial a couple of weeks ago. It was nothing to do with the Chagos deal, and it was all to do with the UK saying you can't use the bases for attacks on Iran. We went through this, around the time of the debate. But apparently the US has put inordinate amount of pressure on the UK, and not only the US, but also Middle Eastern nations. So we've been pressured, I think, by Saudi Arabia and UAE, who have come out in favor of this war, though there's some debate as to whether they were reading the tea leaves and then kind of post hoc came out against it, or have actually been partly driving the US to do what they are doing. Because we are now hearing that really Israel arguably is pulling the strings. The US is going along with it. Trump is aligning himself with Netanyahu very strongly, but it's actually these are Netanyahu's wishes. And actually the Middle East, not big fans of the Shia regime in Iran, and for maybe other geopolitical reasons, could be driving this as well. We'll return to that idea. But apparently the US and these other nations have been putting the UK under inordinate pressure. And Keir Starmer's in a really difficult position because he's got the right wing in the UK chomping at the bit and attacking him for not supporting the US, even though those same people have previously said we shouldn't be going to help any war in Iran, blah, blah, blah. So Nigel Farage, for example, is on record saying we shouldn't do this. And then as soon as Labour don't do that, he says we should do this. So it's like whatever the government does, we want to take the opposite view. And it used to be the case that politics stops at the coastline. In other words, that if there's some kind of warring stuff going on abroad, or if there's need for collective unity politically, then parties would come together and support the government in opposition in the UK. And that's not happening at the moment in this polarized, fractured political landscape. And you've got this opportunism from all the right-wing parties saying we should be supporting the US, and you've got the US saying you should be supporting us and then threatening us, no doubt, with all sorts of stuff. And then you've got countries in the Middle East saying this. So then when Iran, I think, has made some stupid errors, if I was to be the Iranians, the problem is they're lacking leadership at the moment because half of them have been killed. The Iranians have then struck a French naval base and have sent a drone at Akrontiri, I think it is, in Cyprus, one of our RAF bases there, and arguably sent a couple of missiles that way, which then gives the UK an excuse to do a U-turn, to go back on what they said, because actually we have now been attacked by Iran, and so we are responding to attacks on Iran, but we've said we'll defensively, I guess, attack, like Keir Starmer said, we can go back to the source. So we might attack air defense systems if they are the ones that are sending munitions our way, but we're certainly at least act defensively. And the French are kind of saying this as well. So that is an excuse given to those two nations by Iran attacking us. But ostensibly, I would surmise that Keir Starmer wouldn't want the UK to be involved at all, and would like to adopt the Pedro Sanchez approach. The problem is the UK is supposed to be like the closest ally of the US, and people like Lindsey Graham and all these other American politicians and adjacent people are really vehemently attacking Europe, but also the UK, for the lack of support for the Trump administration's moves here. Now let's unpick that a little bit further. So this is JD Vance speaking on that signal gate, I think, in exchange with the attack on the Houthis, saying, JD Vance, the vice president, saying, I just hate bailing Europe out again. So here it is. I just hate bailing Europe out again. Okay, this idea that the US is bailing us out. It's very interesting, because Lindsey Graham is going absolutely nuts because Europe is not bailing the United States out, that UK is not allowing the United States to use Chagos Islands. I think it is now, but the bombers had to go all the way from Missouri to Iran to drop their bombs, rather than from RAF at Fairford or from the Chagos Islands in the initial attacks. And that was really pissing off the Americans. And they are saying, this is on the back of, like, we hate bailing Europe out. It turns out that you need us to bail you out here, or to help you out here. Jimmy Rushton, security analyst, says, so let me get this right. The United States expects Europe to solely fund military aid to Ukraine because it's a war on another continent, while simultaneously expecting European allies to fully support and take part in American military action against Iran. So the idea that the same American administration is saying Ukraine is not our war, Europe is not our war, and yet Europe saying Iran's not our war is not acceptable. Look, we get excoriated for that by people like Lindsey Graham and no doubt JD Vance. And yet that's exactly the same logical principle that the Americans have been using to not support Ukraine. And it's okay for them, right? So Jimmy Rushton says, and as someone in the comments pointed out, if British and European soldiers took part in such an operation, the sacrifices of our dead and wounded would inevitably be belittled and mocked anyway. So Trump's already taken the mickey out of NATO forces coming to the help of the US. So, might not be so inclined to do so this time round. Jonathan Lemire, quoting from Reuters, Trump administration officials acknowledged in closed-door briefings with congressional staff on Sunday that there was no intelligence suggesting Iran planned to attack US forces first. Now, there's another interesting dynamic going on here, that apparently the Pentagon and the White House may not be getting on. And then there are some Pentagon officials, the Washington Post has a piece on this, saying that there's a lot of paranoia and tension in the Pentagon at the moment, because not sure this is a clever idea. And this seems to be kind of coming from the White House as a military objective, as opposed to coming from the Pentagon itself. And the Pentagon is now admitting, and is leaking out possibly, that there was no intelligence to suggest that Iran was going to strike the US. In other words, this was the US striking, and Israel, because I think it's mainly Israel sort of being behind this, but deciding to strike Iran. This was I guess, premeditated. In fact, you can argue that all these talks with Iran were hiding to nothing. They were not going anywhere, and they never were, because the US was always going to strike Iran. And this then is on the back of promises from Trump to do the exact opposite.
I will tell you, you're not going to have a war with me, and you're not going to have a third world war with me. That I can tell you.
How many times do you say that on the campaign trail?
I will tell you, you're not going to have a war with me, and
you're not going to have a war with me. He says, having a war, right? They, Anthony Scaramucci, they were played. That crowd, the electorate, they were played. So it looks like without being prompted to do, as in without being threatened per se by the idea or by the Iranians actually going to strike the US facilities or personnel or whatever, the Americans and Israelis have just decided to strike at the Iranians, and we have to try and work out the objectives. We'll come to the objectives in a second. Oops, again, I'm not being very good with my fingers at the moment, pressing all sorts of different buttons. But we'll come back to the idea of objectives in a second, because Pete Hegseth has given us something of an idea. Dan Pfeiffer here from Pod Save America says there is something disturbingly surreal that after launching a regime change war in the Middle East, the president only speaks to the nation through hastily edited video statements released on state-run media platforms. And in fact, this is a very good point. I'll bring this into play next before going back to that. But Sarah McGee, who's a Democrat running for a Texas House of Representatives seat, says Americans have died and he's sauntering. So Trump is sauntering in from a weekend of golf and he can't even be bothered to stop and thank our service members. I've never been more disgusted by a human being in my life. A close second are the elected Republicans who are enabling this disaster. What's your message to the families of the fallen? That reporters are asking Trump and Trump ignores that. Like, that should be your PR opportunity to say something meaningful about the American soldiers. We now understand that at least 4 Americans have died as a result of this. That's your chance to say something, you know, okay, a bit saccharine, whatever, some kind of PR opportunity for you, and he doesn't take it. So Adam Cochran says they also had no officials on the Sunday show round. So there's been a distinct lack of people going out to communicate what's going on here. Adam Cochran says something is wrong. My guess was they expected a smoother operation that would quickly fold, despite warnings from top generals and the CIA. More on that later. Now they are realizing that they've just galvanized the same regime and have no choice but to overcommit to save face instead of omitting a screw up. Now, of course, this can all change. The protests can mount, people can hit the streets, and there might be a regime change within days, or there might not be. And at the moment, like last night, it didn't seem to be, although it's very difficult to get information outside of Iran, there didn't seem to be too much in terms of protests coming out from Iran. So are we seeing a kind of galvanizing of the Iranians rallying around a flag? Now, this is Pete Hegseth, interestingly now called the Department of War, as according to these guys themselves. And it's sounding more like they are the Department of War rather than Department of Defense. This is Pete Hegseth talking up the objectives.
Thank you. Reagan Reese with the Daily Caller. 2 questions for you. The president said yesterday in his video message that we will leave Iran when we complete all of our objectives. What are our objectives? And can you share more information on how the soldiers who were killed were killed?
Well, I laid out the objectives, as did the chairman. They're completely nested. I mean, Iran has an ability to project power against us and our allies in ways that we can't tolerate. So whether that's ballistic missiles and drones, so offensive capabilities, effectively their navy, which would attempt to set other terms. And
can I just say, just to let you know, what he's advocating here, or he's expressing, is that this was a military operation. Of course, it's a military operation, Operation Epic Fury, but the objectives are purely, I think, military, purely. So, as other people have said, Trump has no interest in human rights. He has no interest in the Iranian people. In fact, Rory Stewart pointed out that he has got no knowledge of Iran. Like, the suggestion is he couldn't name any city other than probably Tehran. Like, he has, I assume, no working knowledge of Iran. This is about flexing and about degrading the military capability of Iran. Now, you can argue that that is a valid, decent objective, right? Because actually, this is a dangerous regime, and you can talk about the benefits of preemptively taking out, defanging the Iranian military capabilities and the regime. But don't kid yourself that this is about supporting protesters. Don't kid yourself that this is about a democratic replacement, because I don't think they've put those things in place. I don't think they've thought remotely hard enough about it.
Pose different costs, drone capabilities, which we laid out there. And ultimately, though, this tying it back to Midnight Hammer, the president has been willing to make a deal. You can't have a nuclear bomb. Radical Islamists can't have a nuclear bomb that they wield against the world.
Now, this is interesting because by his own freaking words and Trump's, they obliterated, quote, obliterated Iran's nuclear capabilities. So if that's the case, then his argument about Iran's nuclear threat here is wrong, or he was previously lying. Hint, he was previously lying.
We gave them every single opportunity. Then we precisely took it away. And even then, after that, they didn't have that. They didn't come to the table with a willingness to give it away. So ultimately, those nuclear ambitions, which never ceased, are something that had to be addressed as well. So that's
okay. It's getting around that by saying I was calling them ambitions rather than actual capabilities.
Discrete sense of what's being addressed here to ensure that they can't use that conventional umbrella to continue a pursuit of nuclear ambitions.
So he's saying we need to take out their conventional capabilities in order to stop them doing nuclear.
As it pertains to the U.S. casualties, that particular incident was, you have air defenses and the lot's coming in and you hit most of it. And we absolutely do. We have incredible air defenders. Every once in a while, you might have one, unfortunately, we call it a squirter that makes its way through. And in that particular case, it happened to hit a tactical operations center that was fortified, but these are powerful weapons. So we certainly will do, as I said, moments like that as we remember them and we take care of them and take care of their families, only stiffen our resolve.
So he's talking to the idea that, and that's absolutely right. The air defense unit is going to be very difficult to take out everything. I talked earlier in my hits and losses video about there was that video of 11 interceptors to miss a ballistic missile that came through what he might call a squirter, right? But the sheer number of interceptors required, and we'll talk a little bit about this later in terms of the cost of this, as in literally like the asymmetry of trying to take out these missiles and drones with very expensive interceptors is pretty staggering. Now, this is Rory Stewart talking on The Rest is Politics, and very worthwhile listening.
Hegemony was a terrible man. He was a blood-soaked autocrat posing as a cleric without much deep theological learning. He was basically a frontline revolutionary. And his regime was horrible, and tens of millions of Iranians turned deeply against this regime. It had almost no support left, and they're desperate for it to be toppled. But anyone who believes Trump claiming that the reason he did this was for the human rights of the Iranian people, or that, what got Netanyahu out of bed in the morning is what they really want to do is help the human rights of the Iranian people, it's for the birds, right? How many?
Yeah, if you think Netanyahu's getting out of bed in the morning to bomb the crap out of Iran for human rights, for the protesters, it's for the birds. It's absolute nonsense. And then you've got, Trump in these, and I'm not going to go through this 6 minutes of him justifying what's going on. But as Dr. Lawrence Sellin here says, not a good look. There's no reason. So what happened in this speech is there was a lot of reference to Israel in the justifications. Now, there is no reason whatsoever to mention Israel as part of a statement justifying a major US military operation, which should be based only on US national interests. It just reinforces a widely felt notion that the war is being fought on behalf of Israel. Now, this is something that is definitely coming to prominence now. There's a lot of talk to suggest that really Netanyahu is the driver of this war. So Netanyahu really is driving US foreign policy, says Ramez Naam. Now, what's this from? So AF Post says, Secretary Rubio conveyed to the Gang of Eight, so these are the prominent politicians in the United States from both parties, that the US chose to strike Iran because Israel had already decided to launch an attack beforehand. The US could either strike Iran alongside Israel or after Iran retaliated against US bases in the region. In other words, reacting to the decisions being made by Netanyahu, and rather than being reactive, saying, well, we'll rather act alongside with you to kind of control the narrative and control the Iranians here, and we'd like to stop them striking our bases, because if you go and do it alone, you'll be less capable than us together, and then they'll start retaliating against the US. So we need to come and help you. Well, that's Israel, and that's Netanyahu dictating to Trump or to the Americans what is to take place. Melanie Dirigo, who is very, very sort of Democrat and whatever. But, what I'm setting out here, I'm setting out a load of the negative arguments for this, and take some of them with a pinch of salt. They won't all be the case, or they might be over exaggerated, but I'm presenting to you a kind of negative case for this war, for the purposes of getting us to discuss and try and understand and see both sides of the coin. Yesterday, I was somewhat more positive from a more military political point of view with regard to Iran, but also said it was illegal, and I don't agree with it. But now let's drill down into some of the more negative arguments. So always follow the money. Saudi Arabia wanted Trump to attack Iran, and there is some question over what was the order of causality here, whether they read the tea leaves, like I said earlier, and then lumped for supporting the war, or whether they were driving, like Netanyahu, the United States to join in with this war. But she says Saudi Arabia wanted Trump to attack Iran. They gave Trump's son-in-law a $2 billion investment, plus $25 million a year, and a $7 billion real estate deal for Trump. The UAE wanted Trump to attack Iran, and they gave Trump's family $500 million plus $200 million to Jared Kushner, and bought a $2 billion in crypto from Trump's crypto company. And of course, we can also throw in a Qatari plane as well. Trump sent the US to war and soldiers to risk their lives because of bribes. So that's a very sort of cynical look at it, but could well be. Now, this next one, I don't think I've heard this, and I would like to know if this is genuine. I hope it's not AI, but it's extraordinary. And I presume it's a slightly older recording that has resurfaced. Somebody saying Trump's phone call
Not
leaked
really.
here. And it's an angry Trump. I do want to know, is it accurate? I probably should have seen this. Yeah, Grok's not answering whether this is accurate. Let me know in the live chat. I just add all the usual skepticism to stuff like this, because in this day and age, you just can't tell. But this appears to be a very angry Trump talking about, well, don't let the Epstein files out. I'd rather go to war than let the Epstein files out.
Not releasing the Epstein files. Fuck Marjorie Taylor Greene. I don't care what you do. Start a fucking war. Just don't let them get out. If I go down, I will bring all of you down with me.
Now, to me, that sounds like that's been generated potentially. I mean, it's too good to be true. But that shouldn't really distract us from what this is ultimately being: a distraction to the Epstein files, a distraction to very poor poll numbers. So the reality certainly is that there is it's either the question might be, is it driving Trump? Is Trump doing this because it acts as a distraction, or is he doing it and usefully it is a distraction? I don't know, but it certainly is a distraction away from the Epstein files and very poor polling. Okay. This is, again, Rory Stewart talking to Trump's general ignorance of the topic.
I doubt Trump can name 3 cities in Iran. Certainly never been there. We heard this from Anthony Scaramucci, trying to brief him on the Middle East. It turned out that Trump knew so little that Scaramucci was trying to show him clips from Lawrence of Arabia to try to give him the most kind of basic information. So the idea that Trump has somehow got a geostrategic analysis. So, if you were to sit down with Trump and say, how strong is the Revolutionary Guard? Do you think, the tradition of martyrdom and Shia Islam and the tradition of Karbala and the Shaheed is going to be important? He'd look at you as though you'd gone completely mad. If it turned out that he'd struck, I don't know, some other country, he'd be perfectly happy, provided he could say, aren't our missiles wonderful? I doubt Trump.
And I think that's the point. Aren't our missiles wonderful is a polite way of saying I'm flexing and I'm showing our military strength in order to degrade a country that is to a large degree a threat, but also I'm tanking the polls and the Epstein files are a problem. But he doesn't know enough about Iran to know what should be done post the strikes. And I'm not saying that necessarily a leader should know the granular detail, but I mean, I don't think he's ever shown enough interest in anything he's really making decisions about, and that is perennially a problem. Yeah, there are lots of so Ron Meller here says, JP, Israel has an unredacted copy of the Epstein file and reminded Trump that they do same strategy Putin uses to control Trump. I've seen a video just now of a former Israeli intelligence guy talking about this being leverage from Israel over Epstein. So that is a prevailing theory. I can't talk to its accuracy. I don't know if Israel have a copy of the Epstein files, right? And if they are actually doing that. But I also wouldn't put it past them or wouldn't see it as implausible. Just, so when you're talking about like conspiracy theories surrounding Epstein files these days, I mean, I don't think there are any conspiracy theories anymore. I think like all the theories out there are way more plausible than I'd really like than I would normally accept, right? Then there's this. So this is very much worth listening to. This is Senator Tim Kaine explaining why Trump's war on Iran is illegal.
Moment, do you think the president is in compliance with the law?
Absolutely. He is not. This is an illegal war, Shannon, because the representative cited the statute, but he neglected to mention the Constitution. And the Constitution can't be changed by statute. The Constitution says no declaration of war without Congress. The president has called this war against Iran. The president can act to imminently defend the United States against imminent attack if that happens without congressional approval, needing later ratification by Congress. But if you're going to initiate war, you need Congress. The president not only did not come to Congress to seek a debate or vote, he acted without even notification to the vast majority of us. This is an illegal war. I have a war powers resolution queued up for vote this week, and I'm encouraging my colleagues to assert the constitutional power vested in the legislative branch. More importantly, though, haven't we learned something from 25 years of war in the Middle East? Have we learned nothing? It looks like this president hasn't learned a thing. And the claims about we're going to change the regime, we're going to stop a nuclear program, there was some threat. All of the intelligence I've seen in 13 years on the Armed Services and Foreign Relations Committees tell me there was no imminent threat from Iran that justifies sending our sons and daughters into war.
Okay, and the president for now indicating there are not going to be boots on.
So no imminent threats, and it's illegal and it's unconstitutional. And there you have it. This is Lord Rickett, so a former UK national security advisor, talking to Bloomberg. Quote, Trump seems to have become worryingly ready to use a formidable US military power and to do so without any constraint. Right, I'm going to interrupt that here because another point that was made in the Rory Stewart, Alistair Campbell, the rest is politics analysis. I've seen two of theirs, and they were both excellent. But a really important point to understand here is this war is very different, and I'm going to call it a war. You call it whatever you like, but this Iranian war or strikes very different because technology has changed. So you wouldn't have seen this in World War II. where you have several days of missiles and planes dropping bombs and throwing other missiles at Iran from a distance that essentially doesn't particularly render the American people involved in that war susceptible to being killed. Yet 4 have died. But essentially it's quite a safe way of doing war rather than 1914 or 1939 when you're sending a whole bunch of people running at the enemy using tanks and jeeps and trenches and this and that. Elements of, say, Ukraine still, but then that's adapted to now being drones and whatnot. But I have said for the entire length of the Ukraine war, Ukraine wins this war by using missiles and guided glide bombs and drones, long-range drones and medium-range drones, because you're not losing your troops and you're attacking the other people and you're X, Y, and Z. So you have had a situation where Venezuela saw the dictator be kidnapped like that using kind of technology and not conventional huge warfare, right? And you've completely decapitated a regime. And Israel and the United States have utterly decapitated the Iranian regime, although, you know, it's still standing and there are potentially many more people to fill the spots or whatever, but an awful lot of high up people have been taken out. And it's actually relatively easy. I mean, it might be very costly in monetary terms, but it's relatively easy compared to like an old school war. Now, what this then means is that Trump looks at this and says, hey, I can make these decisions quite easily. It's quite easy for me to say, let's go and kidnap Maduro or bomb Iran in a way that we are not going to lose hundreds and thousands of troops unless they get like stuck into this protracted foot soldier war. Then it's relatively easy for Trump to just decide to do these big military things, and I think he likes it. It's easy. We've got the tech to do it. When we do it, we are flexing, and then it looks like I am flexing, like the US is a projection of me, or I am a reflection of the US as the leader. And if we're blowing up loads of Iranian stuff because I've said go and do that, and they're going to do that, then we can completely decapitate this regime, and I can sit back and play golf while we're doing it. That's a whole different kettle of fish to what took place in World War II and World War I. And the kind of ease with which you can go to war now and also get some pretty staggering outcomes, right? I mean, militarily, there's been some pretty staggering outcomes in the last 48 hours. With that kind of ease, means that I think you're going to see someone like Trump make this decision far more frequently or easily, right? And that's very dangerous. This is something that Rory Stewart and Alice Campbell talked about, and I was like, yeah, that's definitely a very, very good point. Okay, we're just going to get to the end of this little section, then we'll do some comments and then go on to the next section. So I'll repeat what Lord Ricketts has said. Trump seems to have become worryingly ready to use the formidable US military power and do so without any constraint, guided only by what he sees as US interests at any particular moment. That kind of feeds on what I was just saying. That's why I had to interrupt myself. He's worryingly ready to use that strength because it's quite easy to do so, and he feels good about himself. Quote, this might is right approach sets a terrible precedent where any country can feel free to attack the leader of any other, exactly what the UN Charter was intended to prevent. So everything that Trump is doing at the moment is to denigrate, or it might not be in order to denigrate it, but it is doing so, denigrate the United Nations. It is to defang, not that it ever had fangs, but it's to completely emasculate the United Nations here and international law. And then he's like, oh, I've got this board of peace here, guys. You want the board of peace? Let's try a bit of that out. In fact, I'm gonna now bring you, I had this for the very end of the video, but let's now look at the board of peace, shall we? So this is a video that someone some kind of TikTok. Now, I will start playing it with the music, but then I'll get a copyright infringement. So I'll then mute it. But it gives you the sense that this is a 1970s like Magnum PI type thing. Obviously, it's the A-Team. Okay, so now you don't have the sounds of explosions. Indicted war criminal Benjamin Netanyahu, Mohammed Bonesaw Salman, because of course he cut up Khashoggi, the journalist. Indicted war criminal Vladimir Putin, all of these people starring. Civil war gun runner Mohammed bin Zayed. Dictator Alexander Lukashenko. Ethnic cleanser Ilham Aliyev. Torturer Shavkat Murizov. Jared Garza Riviera Kushner. Special guest star Tony Baghdad Blair. $1 billion joining fee as the bribe. And Donald Trump as the forever chairman. Because, of course, the charter for the Board of Peace has him as the permanent chairman there. So, yeah, this is what you get.
Formed, we can do pretty much whatever we want to do. It's completely formed, we can do pretty much whatever we want to do. Once this board is completely formed, we can do pretty much whatever we want to do.
It's led by donkeys. They're amazing. Once we get this board completely formed, we can pretty much do whatever we want to do. Literally in his own words. Literally in his own words there, we can do whatever we want to do. His sense of you get a real sense that he's feeling his own power, that the power's gone to his head, and that he can do these strikes with ease, like I said earlier. And you're going to see stuff like this more often. And here's a guy that said, you won't see any wars when I'm president. And actually, we're now understanding, I think, that he's not done it more than any other president? This is it. Yeah, here it is. Jonathan Lemire taking a quote from Axios. No president in the modern era has ordered more military strikes against as many different countries as Donald Trump. So Donald Trump is now the most bellicose president, arguably, and he's the one that's claiming he's a peacemaker and has created the Board of Peace. So the hypocrisy there is quite astounding. Now, Jared Ryan Sears here says, it is becoming increasingly clear that Trump thought the US and Israel could launch attacks, take out Khamenei, and then turn around and get an immediate ceasefire from Iran. A serious miscalculation. Many have been killed, including Iranian girls going to school, 4 US service members, and people in Israel, UAE, Bahrain, Pakistan, Kuwait, Lebanon, and Iraq. At least 600 dead so far. Alliances are being strained, stockpiles are being depleted, and there is so little coordination that a friendly nation accidentally shot down 3 US jets. More on that in a second. There was no imminent threat, no need to launch this attack without congressional approval, and clearly no follow-up plan. Already, the talk has changed from a 1 to 2 day operation to 4 to 5 weeks, and it could easily be much longer. This is what happens when someone thinks he can do whatever he wants, and others, particularly Congress, let him get away with it. So that is, I think, a pretty solid synopsis of where we're at, maybe, or where the US is at. Jimmy Rushton, again, security analyst, says the United States spent months threatening, insulting, and belittling their traditional allies, and now is whining that they don't want to join America's latest war in the Middle East. So we're returning to the idea that Europe should be come to help us. We're always bailing out Europe, and then they're expecting Europe to bail out the United States. But actions meet consequences. If you've just spent the last 6 months taking the piss out of Europe, insulting us at every conceivable opportunity, and then putting tariffs on us and starting trade wars with us, well, if you want to use our bases for your own little war, you can feck off, right? You can honestly do one, is what Europe is justifiably thinking in many quarters. Deborah Haynes here says, so she's a security and defense editor at Sky News. She says the US Secretary of War just took a swipe at the UK and other European allies over their position on the US war in Iran. Pete Hegseth praised Israel as a capable partner and then said, quote, unlike so many of our traditional allies who wring their hands and clutch their pearls, humming and hawing about the use of force. Actually, we're humming and hawing about the breaking of international law to then follow you into this thing that we have no idea what your objectives are, and we don't seem to see any clear pathway forward after you blow up loads of stuff. But it's fine for you guys to take the mickey out of us, though, I guess. Brian Krasenstein, and by the way, when I'm saying this and being kind of affronted by such idiocy, of course, my good American friends and viewers, this is not the American population I'm talking about. It's the few people at the very top of the food chain, unfortunately. Brian Krasenstein says the Secretary of War, Pete Hegseth, just flipped out when asked by a reporter why our men and women are being sent to war. I think this gives you a good indication that there are probably some frayed, there's tension in the Pentagon, I would assume.
The American people also want to know what they're sending their men and women to war for. Is there a concern of this spiraling into a longer war? And then one for the chairman when you're done.
Did you not hear my remarks? I mean, we're ensuring the mission gets accomplished, but we are very clear-eyed, as the president has been, unlike other presidents, about the foolish policies of the past that recklessly pulled us in to things that were not tethered to actual clear objectives. So
that pretty much sounds like what you're doing now, mate.
We know we have plans, we have generals, we have chairmen, we have commanders, CENTCOM commanders, Admiral Cooper.
The American people also.
So he's a little bit defensive there, methinks. This is interesting. This is Jesse Waters on Fox News speaking to a veteran. And Jesse Waters is one of the most irritating human beings on planet Earth. And by irritating, I'm underselling it. Like, my distaste for Jesse Waters knows no ends. I spend my time wondering whether I hate him or Trump or Putin more. Anyway, there's just something about him.
Jack Carr is a former Navy SEAL. Jack, why is this not Iraq?
Well, there's a few things. You said something quite poignant in the last segment about us having a hangover from the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan. I thought that was very clever. It was almost like we had 20 years of our senior level leadership drinking and waking up with that hangover, but never learning from it and taking steps to mitigate it the night before or during said drinking binge. And we can trace this all the way back, end of World War II, 2 years afterward, 1947. We changed the Department of War to the Department of Defense. And ever since then, our track record was not that great, leading all the way up to the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021. Now we have a Department of War. Precision in language reflects precision in thought. And since we've changed that name to the Department of War and we have new leadership in there with on-the-ground experience in Iraq and Afghanistan, you and I both know many of the people in the administration that did serve downrange during that time frame. And now there's been a different track record over this last year.
So, you know, now it's the Department of War. Before it's the Department of Defense, and that was all a bit, rubbish. But now we've learned from all that, and now it's the Department of War because we renamed the Department of Defense to the Department of War. That's why the attack on Iran is unlike the previous wars in Iraq. Right? Okay, got it. Brilliant. Yeah. Right, let's look at a couple of your no doubt magnificent comments, go through some of this before we then look at gas and some strikes and some issues for the US and other nations around. So I just want to say thank you to Noel Grace for a very generous super sticker there. Thank you for supporting the channel. It is truly appreciated, Noel. Thank you to Tom NPS. Thanks, JP. And then writes something in Ukrainian that I can't read, and I can't do a translation on. So Benny, I don't know if you're able to do a translation of that. That would be fantastic. I can't on this comment thing do a translation of that, but thank you very much, Tom, for your support of the channel. Here we have Who's Popping. It's difficult to imagine that military airstrikes will change the position of the Islamist elites who control Iran. For them, this has profound ideological significance. Yeah. And I guess the question is, and I don't know, nearly enough about Iran, but how much does that kind of theocratic organization, how deep-seated is it, and what depth does it have throughout society? How easy would it be to unseat? How much of a grip does it have on society and on communities? And can it be easily overturned if you have it largely beheaded, or to just more of the same fill in to these positions? I mean, militarily though, Iran, I don't know how many people Iran have lost recently, but they would have lost in the last 48 hours huge numbers of very experienced military personnel in terms of air defense, pilots, all sorts of stuff like that. So not just you losing kit, they'll be losing a lot of people who know what to do with that kit. And we're also now seeing the destruction of whole intelligence buildings and police stations and stuff. And so I think, and if this is going to go on for 4 to 5 weeks, so if I was the Americans and the Israelis, if you're really wanting regime change, I guess I'd imagine it would look something like this, which is military targets first and foremost, because what we want to be able to do is operate almost freely with our planes either much closer to Iran or even over Iran, right? And therefore we just need to completely do DEAD and SEAD, destruction of enemy air defense or suppression of enemy air defense, right? So you take out the air defenses, you take out their ballistic missiles that would attack your bases, you take out the radars, you kind of do all your military stuff, and taking out military bases and kit. You spend a good few days, maybe even a week, doing that just relentlessly. But already, actually, you're seeing intelligence buildings getting taken out, police stations, because then you go on to the next level. Again, I don't really know what I'm talking about, but this would be how I'd logically approach it, which is then you take out the ability for the government to keep suppressing its population and the tools of suppression and oppression, and the loci, like the places of government power, right? Not like parliament, but these particularly important locations. You start doing that, and it facilitates protest, military targets won't change a regime, right? But if you start moving down that ladder towards some of these other targets, I mean, if they're serious about doing this for 4 to 5 weeks, well, first of all, it's going to be insanely expensive. I mean, insanely expensive. That kind of ordnance over 4 to 5 weeks, and they're still blowing up places now, and they've been doing it like relentlessly for a couple of days, would just be incredibly expensive. But they're willing to do that. Cheryl says, look like the Iranian leadership were trying to drag everyone possible in. So then you get onto what the hell are the Iranians thinking? And like I've said many times, they have had their leadership decimated. And so therefore they're maybe not making the best decisions, or they're flailing, or they are trying to bring everyone around involved. But then that's just ridiculous, because they're going to find it hard enough fighting against just Israel and the US. You add in, so we'll come to Saudi Arabia in a minute, but Saudi Arabia have been complaining that the US is not helping them defend themselves, that they're going off to help Israel defend themselves, and they're leaving these nations around to look after themselves, even though it's their critical infrastructure and civilian infrastructure that's being harmed by the US military intervention. But actually, Saudi Arabia got a pretty useful armed forces, right? And nations around there are themselves fairly capable. So if Iran's bringing these countries in to fight against them, honestly, they're just on a hiding to nothing. And then trying to strike out the French and the British is absolutely ridiculous, in my opinion. Like, honestly, can't make sense of it. Unless most of those strikes are a result of electronic warfare or air defense sending these things off course, and that's very probable in at least some cases. It is. I'm not sure of the the cleverness of Iran's response. Viggo Holmson says the preemptiveness of these strikes is rhetorical. It's about being a delusional, power-wielding bully intending to coerce others to follow his wishes. I think that pretty much sums it up completely. There's not a word I disagree with there, really. Thank you, Viggo. Best way to predict what Trump does is see what he accused others of. Yeah, I mean, yes, there's always so much projection, isn't there? Who's popping? Criminal US regime, criminal Iranian regime, criminal Israeli regime, criminal Russian regime. I'd lump a few more Middle Eastern states into that as well. I mean, we are living in this new age of empires, or at least bullying imperialistic powers. As Margaret says, stand firm, Starmer. Appeasing a bully will make it worse. Yes, I would agree with that. Timothy Miller, as an American, I would say don't help Trump. This is not America's war. It is Trump and MAGA's war, period. Yes, and what's going to be interesting, I don't think it's had time to develop because maybe it's been the weekend. But now we're on to Monday. I'll be very interested, and things like the markets will play a part. But it'd be very interesting to see what public opinion is, whether it tracks with success or whether, irrespective of the success of the strikes, public opinion will be, this is not our war. This is not a sensible thing to do. We weren't attacked. We've attacked them, etc., etc. Like whether this comes back to bite him on the ass. I don't know how much of a public swell of discontent there might be or not. Zeb Carter says, USA meddling in European internal affairs to split the EU and not lifting a finger to help Ukraine, and now they want us to bail them out. Yeah, right. This really is my opinion. I'm quite angry about this, Zeb. Like I'm genuinely, because I've been so angry for a long time now that that Trump's United States has not helped Ukraine. Like that not so much floats my boat, but blows up my boat. Like it really drives me nuts. And then to have the audacity to say, now come and help us blow up loads of Iranian stuff. You're like, I'm over it. Yeah, that really gets me. What do we have? Badger Bollocks says, everyone can surely now understand why America has tried to stay out of Ukraine, forcing Europe to largely support Ukraine whilst they get on with removing Putin's support networks. Everyone can surely now understand why America has tried to stay out of Ukraine, forcing Europe to largely support Ukraine while they get on with removing Putin's support networks. No, I'm not sure. I think what you're saying is US has been helping Ukraine by planning to get rid of Russia's support networks. I don't think they're thinking in terms of Russia here particularly. I'm sure there's going to be I think it's mainly to do with Israel and mainly to do with Netanyahu and what he wants. But also there'll be a consideration about oil probably somewhere down the line. That really drives, I think, a lot of what Trump does. And if anything, you know, Putin's hold over Trump is an argument against him doing something like this. But it is potentially going to be very useful for destabilizing Russia, I think. But at the same time, it's also putting loads of money in Russia's coffers because the price of oil and gas have just gone through the roof, as we'll find out in a second. Just a couple more of these, then we'll get back to it. Just Jimmy says, love the fact that Ukraine offered to help with anti-drone defense. I think there's a deep irony there. Like, and I got pretty angry in my hits and losses video earlier because these are the countries that need the Ukrainian help for air defense: Qatar, Bahrain, Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and elsewhere. And these are the countries that voted against the Ukrainian resolution in the UN. And I think it's disgusting, but it's kind of sweet that Ukraine says, oh yeah, no, we'll come and help. Do you want our help? Now, do you know that we're the nice guys? Yeah, we're the nice guys. You haven't seen Russia come to help you, but you didn't vote for us in the, and nor did the United States, by the way, in that UN resolution. It's absolutely despicable. But yeah, you know, hats off to the Ukrainians for swallowing that and arguably doing the right thing there. Dave Cruz says, so all of you are pro-Iran, eh? You deserve this channel. Okay, so, and thank you. By the way, mods, don't automatically delete people that we disagree with or you think might be, even some trolls. I do like dissenting opinion because it gives stimulus to discuss stuff. And thank you for allowing this one through. And I love this because this is the exact idiocy that I talked about right at the beginning of the video. I mean, Dave Cruz here simply doesn't have the cognitive breadth of thought to be able to understand that you can hold two things in your mind at once, that Iran suck as a regime, and they do. Look, I'm telling you this now, Dave. So if you think that this channel is for people supporting Iran, listen to me now, because I run this channel and I'm telling you, I do not support Iran. I hate theocracies. I'm an atheist. I'm a secularist. I'm a liberal. I have utmost disdain for a theocratic, dictatorial, horrible regime. I am not sad that Khamenei is dead. I am not sad that most of the regime's military personnel are dead, right? I am not pro-Iran. But you know what I'm also not? I'm not an advocate for breaking international law. I'm also not an advocate of being someone who acts as a dictator and has no recourse to, in this case, Congress and a political democratic machinery of the country of the United States, right? And I can hold those two things in my mind because I'm not an idiot, right? An idiot goes, well, if you're not for Trump, you're for Iran, because I can't understand anything else because I'm not very clever, right? So by all means, you know, show us some nuance. But in the meantime, that facile kind of argument, it's not that it doesn't have, you can have a place here, you can speak to us, but it doesn't have a place here by point of fact that we're fairly nuanced thinkers. Hopefully the viewers here, they've listened to me enough, understand that things aren't black and white, but they're oftentimes gray and different shades of murkiness. That is political and moral reality in the modern world, and indeed since time immemorial. So thank you for your opinion, Dave. It has exemplified the exact opposite of what I'm advocating here, as I discussed at the beginning of the video. And thanks, Benny Pie, for bringing that one in. I talked with Benny Pie last night about like certain comments allowing through that you might think are like trollish, because it gives us a chance to it gives me a chance to enjoy myself, because I do like a bit of a rant and a bit of an argument. But also it can oftentimes exemplify certain positions to allow us to explore ideas. And in that case, it's like just showing a complete lack of understanding of nuance. But I don't know if that sort of person has just dropped that all caps comment in and run away, or whether they are listening and have anything to say back to it. Anyway, there you go. I never realized I was a massive fan of Iran, but who knew? Right, okay, let's get back to it. So we are now, what are we doing? We are looking at, yes, so we're looking at what Iran has managed to achieve in terms of strikes and things back at the US. So they've been massively attacked, of course, and they have still managed to set off, send up a load of drones and missiles. And of course, it's very difficult to make sure all of these are taken out by interceptors, and it's very, very expensive. Now, what happened is the Saudi Aramco refinery was hit. There's some absolutely stunning, no, it's not, like that's too positive. There's absolutely horrible footage coming out from Ras Tanura of this Saudi refinery being hit badly, reportedly by Shahed drones. It's one of Saudi Arabia's key oil processing facilities with a capacity of up to 550,000 barrels a day. Chris O'Wiki says this is a reddest of red lines for the Saudis. They'll have to hit back now, and this is a problem with with Iran doing these things is that they're just going to incur the wrath of Saudi Arabia, who are going to throw their military might behind Iran and Israel. So it also says something interesting about the Iranian strategy. They're clearly trying to put pressure on America's regional allies by damaging their economies. I don't know why they would want to do that. The EU has reached a panic moment, as not all member states have sufficient energy reserves. A leading energy analyst says the EU is likely to increase energy exports from Russia. So this is where Russia could gain, because actually it's not just that Iranian oil is not going to be getting out to the global market, but any oil that wants to come through the Strait of Hormuz is going to be struggling. And Saudi Arabia themselves, now they've had a massive refinery taken out of the equation. It is, it's not good news there. So EU is panicking because it might not have enough energy in reserve itself. We're going to talk about energy mix in a wee second after this. So Qatar Energy has said that it will stop all natural gas production following Iranian drone strikes on its facilities. The company, and here's the big problem, is Qatar's state-owned oil and gas enterprise is responsible for nearly 20% of global LNG exports. So 20% of global liquefied natural gas exports coming from this one company, and it's stopping production at its facilities. That is going to hurt. It's going to hurt gas prices. And indeed, that's what has happened. We are hearing that European gas prices have surged 50% after Qatari LNG production halts. 50%. UK gas price. Now, this is where I'm going to get all environmental. I'm going to explain to you why renewable energies are quite sensible. And I've been talking to you about this for months now, and hopefully what I'm saying might have now a little bit more purchase. Right. Our gas prices. So you hear people on the right in the UK, Reform UK, keep talking about this. Claire Coutinho and people in the Conservative Party talk about this, how net zero is costing us X, Y, and Z. That net zero is the reason our energy prices are high. The reason our energy prices are high has a lot to do with how we price energy, and it's coupling to gas prices. And it's a bit complicated. I'm not going to go into it at the moment. I might show you a bit of a video one day, which is a really good explainer of how it all works. But ostensibly, it's not net zero. So every time Richard Tice or Nigel Farage wangs on about net zero costing us lots of money, you're like, nah. So what we need to do is decouple from gas pricing such that we aren't beholden to the variability of prices due to geopolitical catastrophes, right? So this massive spike in gas prices is potentially a real problem for the UK here, and other places. Gas prices in Europe have surged following strikes on Qatar. Qatar Energy suspended LNG production after attacks on the Ras Laffan complex. Bloomberg reports the market reacted instantly. Gas prices in Europe jumped by nearly 50%. Qatar is the world's second largest supplier of liquefied natural gas after the United States. I don't know if this is from the UK. I presume it is. Chris Smith here, renewables person, says, wow, the grid didn't collapse today in the UK. Why not? 4.4% fossil fuels. And then the rest are 72.6% renewables, solar, wind 62.7%. It turns out that, who knew, renewables are a lot less susceptible to global price variations due to things like wars in the Middle East, right? So if you're someone who's been banging on about net zero costing our consumers too much and our businesses, we have in the UK, I think, the highest energy prices in the whole of Europe, right? So we definitely have high energy prices in the UK, and it is not good. It means that when we want to manufacture stuff, especially things involving lots of energy, so really big industry, when we have massive energy prices, we are not price competitive, and things cost too much and we are able to export as effectively because of our high energy prices. But that's got an awful lot to do with gas and coupling our energy pricing to gas. So we need to get away from that, and that's what our present government is trying to do. Loads of auctions for offshore wind turbine wind farms and that kind of stuff. It gives you they are now so new gas, for example, costs something like £140 per kilowatt hour, whatever it is, when in the auction pricing, and new wind is £91. So it's way cheaper than gas. What people try and do is they say people on the right at the moment are saying, oh, look at wind, it's really expensive in the auction prices, and they compare it to old gas. No, we're looking at new energy needs. So if you want to build new gas to overcome the demand, then that would cost this much. It costs way more than new wind per kilowatt hour. So we need to be building new wind. Now, not just wind, because there's variability there in when we have wind, and the same with solar, but you mix it up with nuclear, biomass, hydroelectric, all this kind of stuff. And look, we have very little need for gas. So when you then get spikes like this, technically we shouldn't be affected, but because of the way we price our energy, we will get affected, annoyingly. And it's just really, really irritating. Yes. But yeah, if we listen to Trump, then yeah, wind farms will kill all those whales. Robert Peston from ITV Political Correspondent says Trump and Netanyahu's war against Iran means global and UK inflation will almost certainly be higher than otherwise and growth lower, which means that tomorrow's spring statement by the Chancellor in the UK about the economic and fiscal statement. So things are starting to look good for the UK economy, right? And therefore good for the government. We've got immigration coming down. We've got fewer people immigrants in being put up in hotels. Loads of really good indicators of government that have been swallowed up by loads of controversies to do with Keir Starmer that have been largely manufactured. And yet the real data for how our government is doing is looking fairly good at the moment in a lot of contexts. This is going to hurt. This is going to hurt our government and every other government and the American government, because inflationary pressures are always, blame for that is always rested upon the incumbent, the government in power. So it's really, really frustrating for any government. So the economic and fiscal statement out due tomorrow may already be not worth the paper or electrons it's written on or with. As for Starmer's hopes of a sustained fall in our energy prices, so we've just announced in the UK £117 per average family, I think, energy cuts. Due to, I think, maybe price restructuring or whatever. That's now probably going to be gone because of what is going on in Iran. So this affects the rest of the world. But also it will probably affect Americans with inflationary pressures there. And of course, they will definitely have much more recourse to blame the government than us in Europe. Now, an American oil tanker was reportedly struck by an Iranian anti-ship missile near Oman while attempting to enter the Strait of Hormuz. Iran is trying to hurt America and the world by reducing the supply of oil. Remember, Trump did this, says Ed Krasenstein. That's going to help Russia, unfortunately, as well. Iranian forces struck a US-flagged tanker, the Stena Imperative, in the port of Bahrain today, setting the vessel on fire, according to Vanguard. Stena Imperative is part of the US Navy's tanker security program. So that has happened. Now, this is the interesting one I referenced earlier. It is Saudi official to Al Jazeera saying America has abandoned us and focused its defense systems on protecting Israel, leaving the Gulf states that host its military bases at the mercy of Iranian missiles and drones. This is interesting. If you start getting Gulf states being frustrated at Trump, then this could end up biting them on the arse. But at the same time, this is something they seem to advocate for. Are we going to see them step up their own air defenses? It could be good for the United States as they buy huge amounts of Patriot systems and missiles. Bottlenecks there, SAMP-T. Bottlenecks there. Everyone needs air defense systems, anti-ballistic air defense. Goodness me, 2 years ago was the time to start getting to anti-ballistic missile weapon systems, wasn't it? If you were coming out with a brand new one now, everyone will be like, oh, nice of you to turn up. We'll have 1,000 of them. Thank you very much. I'm in the wrong job. So yeah, that's an interesting position there. A bit of criticism of the US coming from the Saudis there, as the US leans much further into Israel and helping Israel than it does the Gulf states. Now, Krasenstein, with a kind of negative view of what's happened, here are some other negatives. Remember, I'm focusing on the negatives on purpose. I'm not trying to be biased. I'm just trying to look at the other side of the coin big time today. Breaking war news. Multiple US jets have crashed. We'll talk about that in a second. Iran has also struck a Saudi Aramco oil facility. Iran hit an Amazon data center in the UAE. Saudi officials accused the US of abandoning Saudi Arabia and redirecting its air defense to protect Israel. Quote, they left all the Gulf states that host American military bases at the mercy of the Iranian strikes. Then we have this. Iran fired 1,200 plus projectiles at 5 countries in the first 48 hours. Most were drones. These saturation attacks aim to overwhelm air defenses. I mean, we know this from reporting on Ukraine, right? This is what Russia do to Ukraine and Ukraine do to Russia. This is the obvious stuff. You overwhelm air defenses, get them to use their really expensive interceptors, and then you send the really good stuff. Now, I don't know if they've done that, whether they've got a stockpile of ballistics. We've seen plenty of depots of ballistics go up in smoke. So they might have lost a lot of ballistic missiles. We don't know. Most were drones, though. These saturation attacks aim to overwhelm air defenses and drain interceptors. 20 to 50,000 Shahed drones, so cheap as chips Shahed drones, versus $4.19 million PAC-3 interceptors, put the US and its partners on the wrong side of the cost curve. Ukraine can tell you something about this. You want to learn something about how asymmetries work in air defense? Ask Ukraine. Iranian projectiles fired in the first 48 hours of war. At Bahrain, 45 missiles, 9 drones. Jordan, 13 missiles, 36 drones. Kuwait, 97 missiles and 283 drones. Qatar, 65 missiles and 12 drones. UAE, 165 missiles and 541 drones. Absolutely staggering numbers there. And you do wonder what Iran have got in their locker still. Interceptor mass is really tough, says Azim Azar. Iran's Shahed drone costs around $35,000. Cost to intercept it, $500,000 to $4 million, depending on what you use. That's a 14-to-1 or maybe 100-to-1 cost exchange ratio in the attacker's favor. Bloomberg says that the US and Israel stocks could be depleted in days. This isn't just a military problem, it's an industrial one, an exponential gap. I built a simulator to help me understand the various points at which the interceptor crunch might happen, and he's got some simulated there. So anyway, look, getting Claude to help him. Claude code via OpenClaw and hosted on Replit. I'm going to be doing a video on Anthropic soon and Claude. I cancelled my ChatGPT. I uninstalled ChatGPT. I've now installed Claude because they're more ethical. And anyway, right. So what did I want to say about this? Yeah, that was it. So if you remember, was it, I don't know, a month ago now, Trump was having a right old go at the defense military industrial complex, saying you need to build more things. I think Trump had some kind of idea as to when they were going to strike at Iran and how expensive that was going to be in terms of interceptors and missiles and drones and whatever they're using. And he was getting frustrated because he saw the numbers and the numbers didn't look as good as he probably were expecting them to be. And here we are, a very expensive couple of days for the US and for all those defending against Iranian drones and ballistics. Adam Cochrane again says the incompetence of this administration is astounding. If we are flying in allied airspace, that is involved in live fire. It is our responsibility to ensure those allies know the location of our aircraft. We've managed to do that in the Middle East for decades under both Democrats and Republicans until the incompetence of Trump and Hegseth. What's he talking about? Well, apparently Kuwait, and I say apparently because some are saying that surely they can't accidentally shoot down 3 aircraft. There has to be something else going on here, like the Iranians involved or something. But anyway, the US military has said that Kuwait has mistakenly shot down 3 American F-15E Strike Eagle aircraft during combat. There's video of at least 2 of these come down after being taken out. That's what one of the videos looked like. It just spins around, and both of them spin around and come to the ground. But for those 2 that I was first aware of, the pilots they ejected safely and been located. But anyway, someone not a fan of Trump here says Trump so screwed himself. He thought he'd kill the Ayatollah and the war would be over before the stock market opened. Iran says no to a ceasefire. Iran targets 7 other Middle Eastern countries. Trump can't protect them. Strait of Hormuz is dead. Oil and LNG prices are going up. International airports are shut down, and there is no plan. So that's your kind of bad case scenario at the moment. And just to talk about these 3 planes, all in the same kind of area, US CENTCOM confirms that 3 US F-15 Strike Eagles flying in support of Operation Epic Fury went down over Kuwait due to an apparent friendly fire incident. Tendar says it's extremely hard to believe that this was an accident, but who knows? CENTCOM update. Now 4 US service members have been killed in action. 4 service member who was seriously wounded during Iran's initial attacks eventually succumbed to their injuries. Major combat operations continue and our response effort is ongoing. So that has also happened. We have satellite imagery from Planet and Airbus analyzed by the New York Times shows that 2 satellite terminals were destroyed by the US Navy at the US Navy 5th Fleet headquarters in Manamah, Bahrain. Now, this is interesting. If Iran were to carry out something significant against the United States, what they want to do is take out satellites first, so that, I mean, this is, I assume these are the pieces of kit that would identify and acquire ballistic missiles as targets. You take out these kind of radar installations, then it allows you to be able to have more success with your missiles and drones. Anyway, so the point is that the US has lost some stuff, I guess, compared to what Iran has lost. Just the oodles of equipment that Iran has lost is fairly insignificant, all things told. But, you know, there still has to be explanations to family members as to why these people have died, for what ends, you know, and to explain X, Y, and Z. Iranian forces have reportedly begun to target energy infrastructure in the region, with an Iranian drone attacking the Doha West power station in Kuwait this morning, setting a fuel tank on fire. And again, I don't really know why Iran is trying to do stuff like that. It's just kind of weird. It's just going to be, it's not going to help them. They're shooting themselves in the foot. But anyway, you know, who am I to say? I am no major expert on military strategy against the United States and Israel. Right, now, as I discussed earlier, well, in fact, before we come on to this last section, and thank you so much for all of your patience, I just want to go through a couple more sort of comments from you guys. Chilled Reactions says, ATPGEO, I have a feeling JP doesn't like Trump. There's been a rumor on my channel before that that's the case. I can't possibly comment, but it might be true that I'm not a big fan of his. Might be true. Yeah. Martin, Matt, someone please explain to me what's the difference between Israel, the US, and Russia now? I can't see any for some reason. And this is the problem. So the major issue I have, like I've said many times over the last few days, is that this validates Russia's invasion of Ukraine, because what the US is doing is an attack on Iran that was started by them. You know, they're not answering anything. It was an unprovoked attack on Iran, and they didn't get congressional approval, and there's no legal authority to do this. And that is pretty much the situation of Russia attacking Ukraine. And so do Israel and the US look any different from Russia? Not really. Not really. And that should be deeply, deeply worrying. Johnny Nevergard, thank you very much for your super sticker. Really appreciate you, my friend. Skeptic Canary, hey Tom, when will Trump's luck run out? The US got Maduro by whisker, Khamenei blown up by surprise attack. What will his luck running out look like? This is a surprisingly good comment and is worthy of some time to discuss. Because what happens with Trump is that he keeps feeling the need or the desire to flex again and again, because when he flexed last time, he got away with it. So he got away with kidnapping a world leader and stealing his oil. He's essentially the playground bully, Trump, but he's not getting his comeuppance. Like, the teachers haven't come out and said, you need to stop doing that. The police aren't hanging around the fences saying, oi, you stop doing that. The United Nations seems to be completely toothless, and he's creating an alternative to the United Nations. Meanwhile, he's going into countries, stealing their leaders and nicking their oil. He's nicking their lunch money. He's like locking a kid in a cupboard and nicking their lunch money. It's absolutely outrageous. And then he goes, well, I've done that. So what Tom's talking about here is like this luck of the man to do something as audacious as that and not have anyone be able to do anything about that or wanting to do anything about that. You might have people moaning on YouTube and Twitter and in the halls of the UN, but no one's done anything about it. So Trump goes, well, we did that. Might as well just blow up Iran and kill Khamenei. Oh, we've killed him. And actually, they admitted today that Israel is largely responsible for the death of all the people. That's what Hegseth has said. So we know that that was Israel's thing, really. It might have been helped by CIA and whatnot. But essentially, Israel have defanged the government in Iran. And the US is helping them do all this, blowing up loads of stuff. And Congress is like running around with their knickers in a twist. And the rest of the world is like me, is going, oh, it's very nuanced, this, isn't it? Oh, it's very nuanced. It's neither black nor white. Meanwhile, Trump's going, right, well, you guys discuss about what you think about this. I'm just going to blow up some more shit if you don't mind. Do you mind? Do you mind? Oh, no one's listening. Oh, they're all debating with each other about the morality and the legality of what I'm doing. I don't give a damn. I'm just going to do it. I'm going to do it, and there ain't nothing you can do about it. Midterms, I guess, is when you get to do something about this. But yeah, like, what would his luck running out look like? I don't know. Massive inflation. Like I've said to you before, the only real effect on Trump will come from when MAGA representatives turn on him in a bigger way. So Epstein was the big hope, but you had Thomas Massey, Marjorie Taylor Greene, but now she's given up being a representative because that was too difficult. And Lauren Boebert. Okay, so you had a few people going against him, but then if you have people feeling the pinch of inflation, complaining to their representatives or senators, and then that meaning that they're going to struggle in the midterms, and so they need to make that position known to Trump and maybe start voting against Trump, so that, because at the moment everything Trump does is inflationary, for whether it be tariffs or anti-immigration or strikes on Iran, it's all inflationary. And actually, that is the one weakness, the biggest weakness Trump has. He can get unseated, if you like, or he'll become a lame duck big time in the midterms unless he's going to cheat his way to the midterms. Plausible. That's what his luck run. And it's not luck, it's his own stupidity having an effect on the cost of things for the people who do the voting. But yeah, man, he is being lucky. Or he's not being lucky. It's just the asymmetry of the American military compared to Venezuela and Iran. You put the US and Israel together, it's formidable, at least in the short term. Harry Morse says, I feel much better after good old-fashioned JP rant. So do I, mate. So do I. It's why I do them. Just, I get, it's a cathartic sense of, it warms my cockles. They are wonderful soul-cleansing expressions of frustrations. I'm glad you agree with that, because I'm with you there. Tom MPS, so this comment from earlier, translation, thanks, JP. It's important to realize that military airstrikes can change the position of the Islamic elites that control Iran. For them, it has deep ideological significance, or maybe airstrikes can't change the position. I mean, I don't know how widespread this is, because I saw a very kind of anti-American, I don't know if they were like a pro-Russian Twitter handle, but they had a video of some Iranians saying, I'm against the government, but I hate the Americans even more, blah, 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 blah. And I wonder if there are people who will rally around. I wonder what the degree of rally around the flag will be in Iran. I wonder whether you'll get people coming out in the streets feeling like the US is indiscriminately, like, they're not indiscriminately bombing, they're very targeted bombing, but supposedly there's been a school that's been hit and so on and so forth. Whether you will get many Iranians support the regime when they otherwise wouldn't support the regime, from a natural intuitive rally around a flag scenario. But then of course you've got those people who are deeply ideological. And I asked you yesterday in my video, Tom, how I don't know how many, what the proportion of the population is that really support the regime. So you've seen a number of, not protests, but a number of these masses of people coming out into the streets to mourn the Ayatollah's death, right? And they're kind of hitting themselves like this, I think they do, and you know, and there are lots of people crying, and there are thousands upon thousands of these people. But I wonder how much is performative. I wonder how much is how deep that support goes. Yeah. AJ Simon says, I think Starmer did the right thing. He originally said the USA could not use British bases to attack Iran. Now that Iran has chosen to strike British bases, he has reversed that decision. Good call. I think that's essentially the only call he could do. I agree with you. I think he was right to do both things. Although you could argue he could still be strong and say no to the use of bases like Spain. But I also think he's under inordinate pressure in a way that Pedro Sanchez isn't. So the relationship between the UK and the US is different to the relationship between Spain and the US. Spain can get away with doing that, and the US will be like, yeah, not so bothered. Chagos is really important, and the UK, there's that connection. And I think there would have been some serious threats going on since last couple of weeks, since Chagos initially became an issue. I think Trump's government would have been piling on the pressure on Keir Starmer. Keir Starmer will have had one of the most difficult couple of weeks ever. You know, he's had a by-election that Labour lost, first time since 1931. He's got Peter Mandelson, the Epstein files, things going on. He's got the Chagos Island, and all the time the opposition parties are going to town, and none of the media supports the government at the moment because they're all either outwardly right wing, or they're just anti-incumbency or whatever. So a really difficult situation for him. Why Ukraine? Hey James, wait, does this mean that if I'm anti-Iran, I don't deserve this channel? That's unfair. Yeah, it's the way it goes. That's the logic. Good to have you on board, James. Zeb Carter gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thanks, my man. Really appreciate your support, and thanks for your comments today. Keith Morrison, Trump happily executes a world leader, but loses his mind when he is lied to by Putin that Ukraine tried to drone his house. I did mention this briefly, but this is such a powerful point. I would love to sit down with Trump and lock the doors. You're not allowed out here. I'm strapping you into the chair, and we're putting a video camera on you, and you have to answer all my questions, and you have to answer them as honestly as possible, and you can't just stand up and leave when you get an uncomfortable question. Right, Trump, let's sit down. The first thing, you told us how disgusted you were that Zelensky supposedly and his government tried to assassinate Trump by attacking his holiday home. How do you feel about that? Okay. How do you feel now that we know that Putin has tried to assassinate Zelensky over 20 times? And then you show his double standards there. And then you say, and now you are singing the praises of assassinating another dictatorial leader. And of course, what you end up doing by questioning Trump like this would be showing him that he massively differentiates Khamenei from Putin. And then you unpick, well, why that is. What is it that Khamenei's doing that Putin isn't, or vice versa? Or what are the commonalities between these two leaders? Because you seem to be absolutely full of double standards, and this is the problem. One of his many is Trump is full of double standards, but he doesn't get, like, talking about strapping me into a chair, he never gets challenged enough. The media either doesn't challenge him, or when they do, he just goes, "You're fake news. I'm not answering that question. Next question, please." So he never has to answer difficult questions. He gets the easiest ride as a democratically elected leader of any bloody country I've ever known. He has essentially made mainstream media irrelevant to him, or he's completely taken control of it, like he will do with CNN now that he's going to give the green light to Paramount Skydance and his mate, the Ellison father and son combo. They're going to now control Warner Brothers Discovery and therefore CNN. They already control CBS through the Ellisons, through Paramount Skydance, putting in Barry Wise in charge of the news editing there. So CBS is now a mouthpiece for the Trump administration. Fox is already a mouthpiece for the Trump administration. He's got arguably the Washington Post through Jeff Bezos, and he's got social media through X and Amazon and Meta through all these people that are giving them loads of money. And he's got all the AI companies and Google and OpenAI, and it's only Anthropic that have stood up to him. And he's just controlling. I mean, he's laying all the groundwork for being a dictator. And I'd say functionally, to a significant degree, Trump is a dictator at the moment. Tell me when he goes to Congress to get congressional approval to do X, Y, and Z. He's doing everything by fiat. He's doing everything by executive order. He's gone to war with Iran without going to Congress. So tell me how he's not being like a dictator. Please do, because Congress appears to be completely freaking irrelevant. Anyway, I really like Trump. Kevin Forst gifting 5 ATP Geopolitics memberships. Thank you, matey. And last couple before we get back to it. Mitch Ashdown, I can't complain about you talking so much about America and Trump now, says Mitch as a Canadian. Thanks for your Canadian love, my friend. Really appreciate that. And Kevin, of course, you're a total legend always. Siggy here says, Siggy, is that 17K? Says, Trump was hoping to be received as a savior outside the USA. Well, this is interesting. I wonder what he was predicting the reaction would be to these strikes, because he's probably looking in the war room at this and going, "This is amazing. I'm amazing. Look at us blow all this stuff up. We're so much success here." And then he goes to the rest of the world. Don't you all see that? And the rest of the world are like, "No, you're a bit of a dick." And he's like, what? Oh, no. I wonder whether he genuinely felt like he was going to be a bit of a savior. Yeah, it's worth thinking about. Thank you, Siggy. James, glad to be here. Driving across Ukraine once again, listening to your live stream, celebrating my drone lad's first successful mission. Oh, legend! We're going to have you on again. I keep saying that, but let's have a chat this week, mate. Any day this week, we'll have a chat, James. So you hit me up on a signal and we'll sort that out. Okay, right. Let's get back to it. We're going to go on to the final stretch here. We're going to start with France. I've already discussed this. So France may enter the war against Iran in a defensive capacity, just like the UK has announced. And we've discussed that, how originally they weren't for it, but now that they've been kind of somewhat targeted by the Iranians, it's kind of, you can't not respond to that. But it's possibly an excuse to allow themselves to capitulate to the American demands to use Chagos again. I just want to, this is Nigel Farage's typical double standards. Nigel Farage, back in 2015, we don't need to take foreign policy advice from the American president. So, of course, this is Obama, and he doesn't like Obama. The last time we did that, it was called the Iraq War. Oh, so you don't want to take advice from an American president that takes you into a war. Okay. So I'm just getting this straight, Nige, me old mucker. You're saying don't listen to an American president who wants to advise us on something because it might end up with us going to war in the Persian arena. Okay? Right, I've got you, Nige. I've got you. Oh, what's that, Nige? What's that? Say again. What you just said? What? This was just a couple of days ago. What's that? The Prime Minister needs to change his mind on the use of our military bases and back the Americans in this vital fight against Iran. Oh, okay. Only because I thought you said something completely opposite before. And that you're not an advocate for us going to support the Americans in the Middle East. Oh, no. Oh, no. You're not to be trusted whatsoever. And that's Nigel Farage. John Simpson here, the veteran BBC correspondent, excellent human being. One reason the UK is unenthusiastic about Donald Trump's attack on Iran is it thinks the White House has zero idea what to do if people demonstrate in large numbers, as the president wants, and the IRGC then mows them down. Suppose the regime doesn't fall, but simply hangs on. I mean, this is a real threat. Imagine he says, right, everyone go out, and he said this, go out on the streets and protest. They go out on the streets and protest, and it's just chaos, and then it leads to mass deaths. And if the UK backs that, or any kind of disaster, any disaster that could come about from a poorly planned next stage of this conflict, if the UK is backing it to the hilt, then we become embroiled in those outcomes. It's almost like a Pascal's wager type scenario where if it's all brilliant and we don't fully get involved, then it's not too bad. We're like, okay, we didn't get involved, but it's okay. It all ended up well. That's fine. If we don't get involved and it's horrific, then that's good for us. The only one of the four options that's a clear win for us, if we get involved and it goes well. But then, of course, it's not really a clear win because it's still an illegal war. So we're safer to be somewhat conservative and standoffish here, I think. Anyway, that's where John Simpson's going there. Now, Gandalf says, reports say USS Arlington, which I believe is this ship there, is loading non-stop in Norfolk. That's not Norfolk, UK. I presume that's Norfolk, Virginia, is it? Anyway, reports say USS Arlington, I'm sure an American would tell me where Norfolk is in the US, is loading non-stop in Norfolk with armed security nearby. Here is what that actually means. Arlington is an amphibious transport dock, LPD 24, San Antonio class. Think of it as a floating, it's Virginia, cool. Hey, I know some things. Think of it as a floating logistics hub for a marine landing force. It can embark hundreds of Marines plus vehicles, ammunition, and supplies, then push them ashore using landing craft from its well deck and helicopters or tilt rotorcraft from its flight deck. It is a ship you load when you might need Marines and equipment at short notice. If the US is rushing to backfill gear now, it suggests basic readiness and prepositioning was not in place or pre-positioning before Trump lit the match. You do not start a war and then remember the packing list. So which is it, evacuation, deterrence, or the first step into something bigger? So this is going on at the moment, supposedly, and a few people have been commenting on this. This is a sign that you're like, oh, we might need some Marines, or that you haven't done your preparation. Like, neither of those options are good news for the US, where Pete Hegseth has not ruled out. He's not ruled out boots on the ground. He was asked specifically on this, and he says, it's not for us to give you the details. He's claiming OPSEC, which is kind of right, but it's interesting he didn't say, no, we're not going to put boots on the ground. So there's still that scope for boots on the ground. And of course, if you put boots on the ground in Iran, that is, I mean, that's a nightmare for the US. That is Iraq 2.0, Afghanistan 2.0, a long protracted series of events that could cause all sorts of pain and suffering, economic and otherwise. Or they're just loading up stuff that they forgot they needed. Well, then where's your preparation? You know, I don't know. Crazy times. What appears to be CIA sources are now leaking to Reuters that the regime will not collapse in Tehran. As far as I know, says Philip Pilkington, these sorts of leaks have never taken place 2 days into a major war before. Draw your own conclusions from that. So this is unusual that you're getting potentially CIA leaks happening already. So this could suggest that people aren't happy in the Pentagon and beyond. And in also in another Virginia place. Come on, what's the CIA headquarters? Oh, come on, what is it? Oh, this is my brain going. There's too much stuff in my brain. Anyway, US officials. What's the CIA headquarters called? Come on, tell me. Anyway, US officials skeptical of regime change in Tehran after Khamenei killing, says sources. Langley. Yes, it is Virginia though, isn't it? So, wow. Actually, they're not confident inside the American administration, inside the power, these centers of power, that the administration will topple and collapse quickly as is thought. Now, I don't know. I can foresee it toppling quickly, but also not doing so. I think both are perfectly plausible scenarios. It just depends, I think, how people power works going forward and whether there's enough desire to get out on the streets and seize the day, if you like. Glenn Deason here says, what the Gulf states are learning now and what the Europeans will soon learn is the danger of being frontline states for a declining hegemon. So hegemon is a supreme power, hegemonic power. So the US has always been the great hegemonic power of the last 100 years. You've got sort of Russia. Now you've got China coming up. You've got Europe, UK, maybe back in the 1800s, but not so much now. But he's saying this is a hegemonic power on decline. So during the post-Cold War hegemonic era, the US was the only game in town, and the alliance system was a source of security. As the hegemon declines and uses its military more aggressively to prevent rivals from rising, frontline states get pummeled and protection is gone. How to adjust to a multipolar world should be the focus of our security discussions, but our leaders are instead cosplaying World War II and shutting down open discourse. There's certainly some discussions to be had around, the locations of power in the world, and whether I keep talking about this being an age of empires now, and the US empire, is it in decline or is it just consolidating around the Western Hemisphere? And yet at the same time, it's blowing up stuff in Iran. Oh, this war's not ours. We need to be concentrating America first. We're not concentrating on Europe. Ukraine's irrelevant. Oh, Iran, that's nice. Let's blow that up. Trump, apparently on a New York Times call, believes that the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps will just surrender to Iranian people after being told Venezuelan-style operation is not possible. Trump is absolutely clueless. There is no plan other than bomb and pray. I love that term, just bomb and pray. Like that is the feeling here. So New York Times says, when pressed on his plans for a transition of power, Mr. Trump said he hoped Iran's elite military forces, including hardened officers of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, who have held substantial influence and profited from their existing regime, would simply turn over their weapons to the Iranian populace. Quote, they would really surrender to the people if you think about it, he said. It was those same security forces, in particular the Basij, which organizes local militia, that opened fire on street protesters in January and killed thousands. But he has been told by his advisors that the vast differences in cultures and history made it virtually impossible to apply the strategy used in Venezuela, in which the existing government was kept in place after it agreed to take instructions from Washington and tried to replicate it in Tehran. And this is what some of you have been saying in a live chat, that this is, there is Islamic ideology going on here in a way that it wasn't in Venezuela. Right? So if you're going to think that you can apply the metrics of Venezuela to, or the techniques of Venezuela to Iran, you're sorely mistaken. But that appears to have been his plan. Who is doing his plan? I mean, he won't be planning all this, right? So who is it around him that is dreaming all this stuff up? Because it turns out that the Pentagon and the CIA and Langley don't really seem to agree with the White House. To continue, nonetheless, Mr. Trump appears enamored of using a Venezuela-like model in Iran. Quote, everybody's kept their job except for 2 people, Mr. Trump said of the outcome in Venezuela. He was vague on a question of who should be in the top ruling position in Iran after the Ayatollah's death, or even who should decide. Another quote from him was like, oh, we had an idea of who was going to be the number 2 and number 3 after Khamenei, but they're all dead as well. So it's like we've actually killed everyone that we thought could replace Ayatollah Khamenei. I mean, not for the future, but immediately so. So then we got this situation. This is very interesting. I'm going to first go to Margaret Brennan here, then work it backwards. So or forwards. Just out, Margaret Brennan here says, Face the Nation moderator, CBS chief foreign affairs correspondent, says, just hours before the US and Israel launched strikes on Iran, the mediator from Oman, speaking to both the US and Iran, met with Vice President Vance and then made a rare public plea on Face the Nation to continue the diplomacy. Today, this guy is again calling for a chance to begin talks to de-escalate the situation. Okay. So then Laura Rosa said, it became evident listening to a senior Trump admin official backgrounder yesterday that they did not understand the Iranian proposal, and that Oman foreign minister likely claimed to DC to meet with Vance and do an interview with CBS to explain what he feared Kushner and Witkoff did not understand. Right. We might have Groundhog Day here. So do you remember, I've reported previously that the Ukrainians have been really frustrated that Steve Witkoff doesn't have a clue. He hasn't got a Scooby-Doo. Right? The guy is ignorant of Ukraine and Russia in general. He's a bloody golfing real estate mogul, but he's been put in charge of the Russia-Ukraine war and the Middle East conflicts. Right? The guy that is just not clever enough, not knowledgeable enough, doesn't have the skills to do this kind of work. And remember, he came back from Russia. I think it was one of the ones where he had no one taking notes for him, and he couldn't really remember and misunderstood what the Russians had wanted. And the Russians were getting frustrated with this. So although you might think Steve Witkoff is eminently manipulatable by the Russians, which he is, but also apparently they're getting frustrated because he was so unprepared that he didn't have people taking notes. So the stuff that they were wanting to manipulate him with, he wasn't really understanding it and couldn't remember it, and then went back and misrepresented it. And they're like, well, that's difficult for our plans to manipulate you. So Steve Witkoff is arguably just not the right guy for the job. Not arguably, I'm telling you he isn't, right? So the idea here is that the Omanis are kind of coming to Washington to actually explain what the Iranian position is, because it's been misunderstood by Witkoff and Kushner. This should be deeply embarrassing if this is actually the case. Stephen Pfeiffer says, maybe it wasn't the smartest idea to have 2 amateurs do the negotiating for the United States. These are freaking complicated areas. We're talking about nuclear proliferation. We're talking, like, there's a lot on the line here. We're talking about Iran, the Middle East, Israel, Hamas, Hezbollah. We're talking about Saudi Arabia. We're talking about Qatar, UAE. It's not about bloody Trump hotels and getting permission to build them. There's a lot more on the line here. There are cultural differences, historical differences you need to understand in order to get the best grasp of what's going on, to get the best outcome. And the same for Russia and Ukraine. If the United States, if the Trump administration keeps putting these absolute swear word, I really want to swear. If they keep putting these absolute nincompoops into positions of immense importance and power, then they're making a rod for their own back. And here it is. Although maybe they never wanted to do peace with Iran anyway, of course. They just, this is about Netanyahu getting his way. Zachary Cohen says, new Pentagon briefers acknowledged to congressional staff in a briefing Sunday that Iran was not planning to strike forces or bases, as we heard earlier, in the Middle East unless Israel attacked Iran first, multiple sources said. So in other words, they were prepared to attack the US, but only if Israel attacked. So the US went, oh, we'll attack with you. Why this matters, it undercuts the Trump admin's argument on Saturday that Iran was planning to potentially strike the US preemptively and posed an imminent threat. So this means that basically the US has been lying, or the Trump administration has been lying. John Jackson says this is such a mess. First, Trump did not give reasons. Second, he gave reasons after the attack that were a jumbled grab bag. Third, they changed the reasons again to preemptive strikes. And fourth, and finally, the truth actually comes out. And now you've got Hegseth talking about military objectives, really, just flexing militarily. The Financial Times has a piece titled "Trump has no realistic plan for Iran's future." And there you've got further problems. Oh, I don't want to listen to Lindsey Graham. So his is talking in generalities. Our goal is to make sure Iran cannot become again the largest state sponsor of terrorism. Does the president have a plan to guarantee that happens? No, it's not his job. Oh, okay, we'll just blow up the country and then just leave it to them to pick up the pieces. Right, okay, fair enough. Mehdi Hassan here. And actually, we're going to listen to a bit of Mehdi Hassan talk about, give his feelings on this.
Every Republican president does this, right? Every Republican president comes to office, cuts benefits for the poor, cuts taxes for the rich, raises prices, and then bombs a Middle East country. Ronald Reagan did it, George Bush Sr. did it, George Bush Jr. did it, and Donald Trump has done it. Now, this is where it gets interesting. Donald Trump is not just alone in that pack in the sense the Swin so put it, mentally desiccated game show star. It's not just that it wasn't George Bush and Dick Cheney that attacked Iran. It was the guy from Home Alone 2. It's also the fact that he ran as the anti-war president, the anti-war candidate, the no more forever wars, the no regime change wars. Again, sorry to plug our excellent Zateo content today, but we just put out a piece at Zateo listing out all the times Donald Trump and J.D. Vance and Tulsi Gabbard and RFK Jr. and Stephen Miller and David Sachs, all of these Trump people said, vote Trump. He's the guy who won't take us into any more Middle East wars. Kamala Harris will send your boys to fight and die, Stephen Miller said. Not us. Donald Trump said, there'll be no new war on my watch. He bombed 7 countries in 2024. He started 2025. He started 2026 attacking Venezuela. And now here we are with this major conflict in Iran. We don't know where it's going to go. And it was all a lie. And I'm sorry, I've got to say this. Swin said, we all knew. Well, many of us knew. But we also had a bunch of people on the right and sadly on the left too, who bought into this bullshit line that Donald Trump would be an anti-war candidate. He would be a candidate of restraint, of isolationism, Donald the Dove. It was bullshit. The people who fell for it should apologize today or hang their heads in shame, because what Trump has done, as I say, in many ways is worse than even what Bush did. Bush at least turned up to Congress. Saddam Hussein at least once had a weapons program that people were worried about. With Iran, it's completely illegal and unprovoked.
I thought that was worth listening to. I was just surveying some of these goings on at the moment. I was just seeing if there's any other latest news that has hit, and I find this pretty interesting. It's not so much to do with Iran, except it is, geopolitically speaking. Clément Morin here, French OSINT guy, says France will increase the number of nuclear warheads, currently 290, to an undisclosed number. There will be no French guarantee for Europe, but Germany, the UK, Poland, Netherlands, Belgium, Greece, Sweden, and Denmark will participate in French nuclear exercises. These countries will be able to host French nuclear strategic air force, while French advanced deterrence will now more generally cover the strategic interests of France, of which Europe is a part. You are seeing potentially the eschewing of the American hegemony, and one way of establishing a hegemonic power over others, even if they're allies, is your nuclear deterrence, right? So the US is responsible for looking after Europe's security by being one of the nuclear, really the NATO, protected by NATO and the American nuclear umbrella. France is now stepping up. UK is talking in similar terms like this, and you've got Macron, as this person says, just look at this boss picture. Macron stands in front of a nuclear submarine and announces the expansion of France's nuclear arsenal, the leader Europe needs. Well, this is interesting. So I see stuff like this just in the full context of this divorce between the US and Europe. And at the same time, the US is attacking Iran and Europe is kind of lukewarm in its response to that. And there is so much of this kind of stuff happening at the moment. I think it's absolutely fascinating. Oh, sorry, I didn't show this picture to you. That is this picture, a real, as she says, a real boss picture. Like, but I think there is something to say about the positioning of France and potentially the UK in terms of saying, well, okay, we will step up and Europe will step up, and we won't come to your beck and call when you call us to help blow up Iran. We'll be either saying no, or we'll be very lukewarm in that respect. And we're going to quietly just build up our own capabilities. We're going to industrially stimulate growth through military expenditure, and we are going to see we're going to see Europe stand up on its own 2 feet, like you have demanded. But it means that you then become irrelevant to Europe, or less relevant to Europe. And what's really interesting, and as I said, I'm going to do this video, but you've got this situation where Anthropic, who is this AI company that came out of, I think, OpenAI, because they wanted to be more ethical. So the guy, Dan Amadei, who is the CEO, just, said, right, we're going to have Claude. Anthropic AI is going to be just at least somewhat more ethical. So the Department of War, Pete Hegseth and the Department of War said, right, we want to use all of you AI companies to do whatever we want. And then Anthropic said, yeah, but you can't use us for indiscriminate mass surveillance of the American population, because that goes against the Fourth Amendment. And you can't use us entirely without a human in the kill chain. So if you're going to set up autonomous drones to go and blow things up, since AI autonomy is not reliable enough yet. By the way, when AI was tested in wargaming nuclear strategies, it would press a button 95% of the time. So is that the kind of thinking you want behind fully autonomous units going and killing people? So Anthropic, from an ethical point of view, said, we are not happy. We've got 2 red lines there that we don't want the US government to do away with. Now, what's fascinating here, and this will come full circle, you'll understand why I'm saying this in a second. What happened here is worse than you might think, because so Hegseth said, well, you're not going to get any contracts with the Department of War, but they've gone even further. They say if any American company has any investment or does any work with Anthropic, then we're not going to accept contracts from them. Or basically, they're punishing Anthropic to the absolute max that they can, completely unreasonably. Meanwhile, other AI companies like OpenAI with ChatGPT said, hey, we've got your back, Anthropic. And as soon as the opportunity came up, they're like, oh, we don't have your back, and we'll sign up and forget about Anthropic. We'll do whatever. You can do what you like with our AI. So Anthropic have stood up on ethical grounds to the Department of War and have been thrown to the dogs by the American administration, who are then punishing them unbelievably for being ethical. Now, where it comes full circle, when we're talking about Europe standing up to the United States, Anthropic, there are people saying that Europe should welcome Anthropic because they need AI. So there's Mistral from France. It's a very good AI. We're using it a lot in this channel. Benny Pie does things when we do like description generation. Sometimes that often gets done with Mistral and so on and so forth. It can write good code and stuff like that. But essentially, Europe lacks in data centers and stuff like that. But also Anthropic have really close connections to the UK. And there's a theory at the moment that either Europe or the UK might see Anthropic be exiled from the United States and come and set up in either the UK or Europe. And again, what you're seeing is like an ethical and more reliable entity in the EU or Europe as a whole be attractive. At the moment, it's getting way more investment than in the stock markets than the US is, as the US, when you've got a polarized political system, a two-party polarized political system. You just flip from one side to the other. America is now doing this. You're not having bipartisan agreements anymore. No one's crossing the aisle to work with the other side. So it just goes from there to there, to here, to there, to here, to there. And if you're a business seeking investment, right, or you're a venture capitalist firm wanting to invest to get a solid return on investment over time, the predictability in the United States is no longer there because you don't have bipartisan working together. It's just too freaking volatile. Whereas the EU, based on proportional representation, which all already tempers extremes, and then has the supranational, like the or international entity of the EU based on that. So it's got lots of levels of proportional representation, and it's this behemoth, bureaucratic behemoth. Yeah, but the good thing there is it doesn't do this, right? So the EU as a place to invest is far safer, far more reliable, far more predictable. And if you can then start saying, well, we've got Mistral operating as an AI, we're going to get Anthropic over here because the US has exiled them, and then we're going to be investing in heaps of defense to stimulate our growth, then the EU or Europe as a whole looks like a much more healthy industrial economic place to exist in. And the stock markets are, doing really well. And the US is going through, massive inflation, and there's all sorts of domestic stuff going on over there. And Trump is deeply unpopular and getting involved in wars in the Middle East, but not protecting Europe and Ukraine. And then you're just seeing compartmentalization of the world. And then you have Canada joining Europe and not joining the United States. And then you've got the EU doing the Mercosur agreement with South American countries like Brazil, Chile, and Argentina, and so on. Then you're starting to see the US diminish in its hegemony, right? And that's kind of what we were just talking about earlier. So when I just switch over to Twitter, the last 20 minutes, just spitballing on the fact that Macron's just announced that, hey, we're going to be the nuclear guys in Europe type thing. That is a symptom of a declining United States, I would argue. And the question is whether Europe is going to grasp this with both hands and become a major international player, or whether it still sees itself as, playing second fiddle to the United States. So interesting times ahead, geopolitically speaking. Okay, right. That's probably me done. Now I need to just go through some of the final super chats and whatnot that you guys have so kindly thrown my way. Where do we get to? So I think it was down to Daryl Thomas. Good to have you on board again, mate. Steve Bannon and Jeffrey Epstein discussed Trump attacking Iran in 2018. It has just come out in the files. I think you can really build up a case that this is all part of the plan to distract and achieve some other things, whatever it may be, but also be susceptible to manipulation from Israel and the Middle East. All of those things can coexist, I think, fairly successfully or unsuccessfully, as you may see it. Thanks, Daryl. Parky Posey says Glenn Deason is the GOAT, greatest of all time. I think you find that's the legend of the multiverse. You clearly don't know what you're talking about there, Parky. Legend of the multiverse, by definition, has to be the greatest of all time. And as we all know, I awarded myself that, 2024, 23, I think it was. So, Glenn Deason can take a very distant second place as far as I'm concerned. But thank you, Barky, appreciate that. Doris for POTUS. I think she's not born. She's local to here, to be honest. Don't think she's got a chance. Cheryl, but God sent Trump to save us from nuclear war and bring world peace. That's what my neighbor said. Yeah, Cheryl, like if you want me and your neighbor to have a chat, I'm up for it. We could have a chat. I could put it straight there. Right. Oh, I've just deleted the next comment. That's what's gone back to Cheryl's. Oh, sorry about that. So let's go on to this one. Or maybe I didn't. Alexander Alexander Shaw said, I don't want to say Alexander's Shaw. No, Alexander Shaw. You guys missed the point entirely. This action has a good chance to break both the Islamic Republic and the Trump administration at the same time. Win-win. So I've been, Alexander, this is a worthwhile conversation. I've been wargaming in my head all these different scenarios where, and then I think, oh no, I don't want that to happen. Like because I don't want Trump to succeed too much, because I think that's dangerous for the world. Then I'm thinking, oh, that means that Iran needs to succeed against the United States militarily, and I think I definitely don't want any personnel dying. But what you almost want is some kind of embarrassment to happen where things don't go. This goes back to what Tom was saying, the Skeptic Canary, where he was saying, he just keeps getting good luck. When does the bad luck happen? And what you almost want is some bad luck to happen here, but that doesn't result in like the death of American personnel, because otherwise he just gets rewarded by these very dangerous things that he gets involved in. But what you want is this not to be popular back at home, and the Islamic Republic getting done over. So it being the end of both the Islamic Republic and Donald Trump. I think that's I can. There is a possible future where that could happen. There is significant indication that the drones fired at the British base in Cyprus were from Hezbollah. Yes, I almost mentioned that, but I wasn't 100% sure about that. So yeah, that is definitely a good point there. So if it comes from Hezbollah, of course, then that is somewhat different than it coming from Iran. But thank you very much for that. I think I might have accidentally deleted a super chat there, but I don't know if I did. Right, okay. Almost the final one here. So Murphy7801 says, as one of my citizenships being French, more than happy for a full umbrella, but think the issue is that we're not quite there weapons wise. This feels like a first step to displacing the USA without alerting the USA. I think you've absolutely nailed it there, Murphy. And I haven't, because I was only spitballing, just reading out to you. I haven't had time to think about this, but this is exactly right. It's not saying we'll do the nuclear umbrella, but it's like, we'll produce more nukes, just going to produce more nukes just because. Oh, and by the way, if you want to do these exercises with us, yeah, we'll do that. And it gets that consolidation where you're working together, you're singing off the same song sheet, and it is like moving towards a European nuclear umbrella. So I think you're absolutely 100% right there, Murphy. Thank you for your very generous super chat. Really cool. Right, two more comments. M. Melchio says, how dangerous is it that enemies without ethical priorities develop autonomous systems? Very dangerous. So that is definitely a concern. And you know, I for one have uninstalled, as I said earlier, my ChatGPT app, and I've installed the Claude app from Anthropic because, you know, I want to try and support ethical decision making, and it you know, it starts with, you know, boycotting and starts with voting with your feet or voting with your wallet. I mean, these apps are free, you know, unless you, but I have seen people say that they have cancelled premium ChatGPT memberships and gone for Claude instead. And for those that do pay for AI, I would suggest looking into taking on Claude instead of ChatGPT, so that you are rewarding, you know, assuming that you'll get pretty much the same kind of service, same kind of product. You are rewarding ethical decision making, and you are punishing, financially speaking, unethical decision making. So I would definitely advocate for binning off ChatGPT and taking on Claude. So yeah, thank you for that. And finally, Harp says Trump could cure cancer and Jonathan Pierce would find something wrong about it. So somewhat connected to what you're saying. And this is right, we're going off the Iran topic, but this is, so I just had a weekend away. at these kind of cabins in a holiday park, and we had hot tubs in these cabins. It was free. My mate's the manager of this. I hadn't seen. I say my mate. I hadn't seen him since we were 18, right? But my other mates are in contact with him. He's now managing this holiday park. So we've got these free cabins, and they're nice, sort of kind of static caravan type cabins, and they had a hot tub with them. And I was in a hot tub with my mates, and I was just talking about. We were talking about one of my friends works in the NHS up in Manchester, and I was saying, when we're talking about policy making, I was saying, isn't it interesting that, you know, I'm not a smoker. My parents are smokers, my sisters are smokers, but I was never a smoker, and I'm kind of like nominally anti-smoking and whatnot. But yeah, just whatever. But I looked in. I think I wrote an article on this once. The amount of tax you get in, I don't know if it's still the same because tax is gone up and smoking's gone down and blah blah blah. But the amount of tax you used to get in for smoking actually did cover care for lung cancer and smoking related issues. So although people are like, oh yeah, smoking costs the NHS loads of money, actually it was getting in enough tax to cover that. So it wasn't costing loads of money. And here's where it gets really cynical and quite disturbing. But I was doing some thinking once. I was like, lung cancer generally kills people at the age of 50, 60 or whatever, but generally before they have retired and started to go on the welfare system. So where you have state pension, when you're going to go into hospital more often, and you end up going into hospital due to cancer care or dementia or some other thing that's eventually going to kill you. In other words, like, as horrible as it is, but being killed by lung cancer as a result of smoking actually can save the government money, because you're not paying them out in pension and then putting them through care, some kind of other death care that they would get eventually anyway. And you're getting the tax income from smoking. So I was like, this is really counterintuitive. And I'm not someone that advocates for smoking, but you can build up a case that smoking actually helps society by, and I'm sorry if anyone knows people who have died from lung cancer and whatnot, but by, you know, killing off people before they draw heavily on the welfare state and then end up costing more, and so on and so forth. So my point of saying all of this is that, yeah, I probably can find some kind of weird argument that could say that there was something wrong for finding the cure to cancer, because then, you know, so yeah, anyway. Yeah, I would talk about how, you know, if cancer doesn't kill you, then you're going to be living even longer and even longer, and then you're going to be an even bigger draw on the welfare system that then, you know, then it becomes even more costly, and then, but it means people have to work later, but then you can't work later because you're too old, and then you have anyway. So you can build up some kind of weird argument where I could probably do that, but I'm not advocating for that. I'm just saying that you potentially could if you so wanted. Anyway, that's the kind of way my brain goes, is like kind of questioning bloody everything. And you know, don't take what I've just said as gospel truth, because not that I believe the gospels, but you know, there you go. Right. Anyway, that's enough from me. We've gone off on one at the end there. JP went to the dark side. Yeah, just I always like thinking about these things. Right. Thank you very much to all of your wonderful contributions in terms of super chats, but also your brilliant commenting. Thank you to Benny Pye, who has been curating the conversation. Just a little note to, and you're really good at this, to the mods who are brilliant. Sometimes just hold back from banning people, because just think, would JP want to just interact with this? I know some people say don't feed the trolls. It's not feeding the trolls. For me, it's baiting the trolls. I'm going to feed you with this, but it's got a hook in there and I'm going to hook you in. So sometimes it's good. I like to talk to some trolls, but other than that, it's such a lovely foundation for conversations that you guys have nurtured, because I've had loads of people commenting saying, it's so much more pleasant to comment here than at other channels that don't have mods. So you mods obviously do a brilliant job. So thank you for all of that, and I really do thank you for that. Thank you to all the super chatters, members and subscribers. You're all absolute legends. Hopefully this was of use. We'll see how this develops. Lots more stuff coming out all the time. Thanks again, Toodle Pips, and cheers to Benny.